All right. We've got one final presentation. We're also going to be giving away some money. So again, if you want a chance to win $1,776, just go to timetofreeamerica.com, timetofreeamerica.com, and there you can register for a chance to win. Now our next presenter, his name is Dr. Richard Bartlett, and his protocol, Budesonide Works, has saved more people in the world than arguably any other protocol. So this message is a life-saving message. This gentleman actually was a former top medical advisor for the governor of Texas for 7 consecutive years, and he has a brief intro video so you can see the level of persecution that he's faced as a result of saving the lives of millions of people. Devin, hit it.
I'm Dr. Larry Burchett, MD, an actively practicing ER doctor and the medical expert for Fox in San Francisco. Let's get into this viral video by Dr. Richard Bartlett, who claims to have the silver bullet treatment for coronavirus, using inhaled steroids, budesonide.
Effective treatment that's cost-effective, readily available at every pharmacy.
Budesonide, and so is it done in an inhaler?
It's an inhaler, and so it does actually come as an inhaler, but I'm using it in a nebulizer machine.
That simply isn't true. That's simply false. Very common medication that nobody knows about. I just have to laugh.
There is no silver bullet at the moment, and there might never be.
There is no silver bullet response to the virus at the moment, and there might never be.
If you're hearing things about things that are just so too good to be true, it probably is.
He claims inhaled steroids are the cure for COVID-19.
And I wish it was as simple as that.
The CDC also says there is no known cure for COVID-19, so we can verify that claim is false.
There are people that are believe that budesonide and taking zinc is working. Is there any downside to doing it?
There's a placebo effect to make you feel better and less anxious, but in reality, Matthew, it doesn't.
There's a placebo effect to make you feel better and less anxious, but in reality, Matthew, it doesn't have any effect.
Late care only. If people had COVID, they were told if you have mild to moderate symptoms, just stay home and tough it out with Tylenol. And then if you're sick enough, go in the hospital and we'll make a ventilator for you. And we started pumping out ventilators. But at the beginning, 90% were dying with ventilators. And we were told to hold our breath and wait for a vaccine. But there is good news. Oxford University finished the STOIC trial. And in the STOIC trial, they found that 90% of hospitalizations for COVID patients could be prevented with early, effective, with one medicine, inhaled budesonide.
Because there was a maverick doctor, Dr. Richard Bartlett from West Texas. He made the national news by saying, you know what, I think inhaled budesonide works. And he said this early in the spring, and he was on national news. He said, I'm trying it. I'm a doctor. I'm trying to help my patients. I am using empiric treatment. I know there's no randomized trials, but he was doing the right thing. That's what American doctors all should have been doing.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, for a 15-minute life-saving presentation, please stand to your feet and greet today's final presenter, Dr. Richard Bartlett.
Raise your hand if you know somebody that died from COVID. It's a problem. Nobody should die from COVID. Over a year ago, I presented a strategy that would save lives, that was later proved by Oxford University in the STOIC trial and the Principal trial, 2 randomized controlled trials, that 90% of hospitalizations and ER visits would be prevented with just this one medicine, budesonide, used outpatient at home. Fauci knew about it. Have you heard him say otherwise, other than it was a placebo? Oxford is the oldest university in the English-speaking world since 1096. 72 Nobel Prize laureates, and they did 2 randomized controlled trials. That's called science. Fauci just said something and doesn't offer science. But I'm here in Colorado because people are still dying. And I'm going to tell you what to do so you can stop that. And I'm going to right now throw something out that you've never heard before, and you'll never hear it in the mainstream media. We beat COVID-19. COVID-19 was caused by SARS-2 variant. Now we got a Delta variant. Where did SARS-2 come from? Rand Paul is a hero. Let's give it up for Rand Paul. Rand Paul was waving evidence under Fauci's nose from the Senate floor. And Fauci was stuttering and turning red. He was on his heels, embarrassed. He had been caught red-handed. There was gain-of-function research to make a very contagious virus that's very, very benign that causes the common cold deadly. And it was done with gain-of-function research that was paid for. And the evidence was presented in the Senate. You know, you got Senator Tom Cotton, who for over a year has been saying, this looks like a bioweapon. I'm telling you, we are at war. This is germ warfare. So if I said we beat COVID-19, why are people still dying? Because over 99% of what we're seeing now is the Delta variant, not the SARS-2 variant, a different virus. You know, if you look at Iceland, they had 243 mutations that they documented 3 months into this pandemic. This isn't a mutation. We were having our freedom restored February 1 for about 4 months. Do you remember that? Something new had to happen. Something new did happen. Where did SARS-2 come from? Where did Delta variant come from? You get it? So I'm going to tell you what we can do to stop this. Because I had a strategy that works for early treatment that Oxford has proven, which is using nebulized budesonide, an antibiotic called clarithromycin to protect from secondary bacterial pneumonia, and an aspirin. And that works. It's not just 90% effective, it's overwhelmingly effective if you use it early. But early outpatient treatment was suppressed. You know, I did an interview that went viral, 5 million views, taken down by YouTube in 2 weeks, talking about budesonide because it was dangerous to the virus and to the agenda. But the bottom line is we have many things that we can use. So you do that, 90% is pretty good. If I got a 90 in class, I was really excited. And, you know, last month I was in Michigan. And yes, I used to be an advisor for Governor Perry. And yes, that was for 7 years. And I was surprised at the end of it to receive the Meritorious Service Award for what we accomplished from the Texas Health and Human Services. But that was then. And now, when I was in Michigan last month, I got a group text asking if I would help with a new project in Texas that's being done by the state through the Division of Emergency Management, Texas Division of Emergency Management, setting up monoclonal antibody infusion centers. They asked me on a Friday, I was there on a Monday. You want to know how committed I am? It's 11-hour days, 6 days a week, on purpose being surrounded by infected COVID patients only to help them. And it works. And so in 1 month, we blew the doors open. And a month ago, we started just all out, full bore. Over 1,200 patients treated. And the statistics are, if they're treated early, that is early outpatient treatment, that 30-minute infusion decreases your chance of dying or being hospitalized from COVID by 70%. That's a pretty good investment of 30 minutes. And this is not new technology. It's nothing that Bill Gates cooked up, thank God. This is science. This is medicine. We've been using monoclonal antibodies for 40 years. But this works. It must work, because why would you have Biden try to shut it down? Why would he say, we're going to cut the distribution to Texas by 50%, just arbitrarily? It must work. So we got something that's 90% effective plus. We have something that's 70% effective plus at keeping people out of the hospital even. So there's things you can do. But let's talk about if you have a loved one in the hospital. Do you know anyone in the hospital right now with COVID? It's still happening. People are waiting and not getting treated early. And they're thinking they're going to tough this out because they've been told by other healthcare providers that this is just a flu virus. It's not. This is a bioweapon. And so if you play with this, you might end up in the hospital, like the firefighter that called me. I get random calls all the time from strange numbers, and this was a firefighter in the hospital saying, you know, I was doing all right for the first 9 days. I was taking over-the-counter medicines, and I was fighting it off, taking my vitamins like they tell me to take my vitamins, like that'll cure a bioweapon. Really? But on day 10, he wakes up and he's short of breath. And he's in danger. He fell off the cliff. Now he's in the ICU calling me from the ICU, asking me to help him. So what can you do if you have a loved one in the ICU because they got COVID and they're in the hospital now because they have ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome? I'm talking medicine. I'm not a lawyer. I treat patients. And I am committed. And so I'm going to tell you what to do if your loved one is in the hospital in the ICU. There's a study, if you go to budesonideworks.com and you click on the validation tab, look at number 9. Nebulized budesonide against ARDS for patients on a ventilator in the ICU will do 4 things to get them off the ventilator. It'll shut down the release of the poisons, the cytokines from the lung lining. It'll reverse the swelling in their lungs called edema. It'll stop the scarring that's happening because of the inflammatory chemicals. And it'll improve their blood oxygenation. All 4 of those are good. And so you need to, if you have a loved one in the hospital, demand. Stop asking. Patient rights have been trampled since January 1, 2020. All rights have been trampled, but patient rights, it's atrocious. It's a travesty that's happening, where you can't have your best advocate, your family member, be in the room with you. And so you need to demand that you get budesonide 1 milligram respiratory treatments, nebulized treatments for your loved one. People are getting this across the country, and they're getting it every 4 hours, and people are coming off the ventilator. They're getting out of the ICU. They're getting out of the hospital. They're getting their lives back. But how do you do that if the doctor says no? Well, they can learn to say yes. And so this is how you help them learn to say yes. My sister is an attorney and an RN, and she used to work with the Methodist hospital system in Texas. And so she's been on the other side. And she said, tell patients that they can ask for an ethics committee consult. They can demand an ethics committee consult immediately. Call the nurses station, say, I demand an ethics committee consult immediately. That'll drive the hospitals and the doctors crazy. And all of a sudden you got their attention. And so when they reach back to you and they're going to try to pacify you, you say, I demand budesonide, because there's evidence that it helps. And there are people that are getting their loved ones home with this medication right now, all over the country. And if they say no, if the doctor comes to you and he's very patronizing and condescending and obnoxious, which many of them are, you say, you're fired. You call the nurses station and you say what President Trump often has said, you're fired, right? And so you can fire the doctor, and whose responsibility is it to get a new doctor? It's not yours. They'll make you feel that way, like, oh no, I can't do that, or I won't have anyone to take care of my loved one. They might kick me out of the hospital. That's illegal. It's the hospital's responsibility to get you a new doctor. And you can call the nurses station, and you can let them know that if I will continue to fire every doctor you send to me until I get what we want for my loved one, because I love my loved one, and there are people getting their loved ones home all across the country right now. because they're demanding and they're getting nebulized budesonide for their patients in the hospital because it works against ARDS. And I'll tell you, most doctors are not aware of that. I'm shocked at the ignorance. But you're not ignorant anymore. And so share this information. If you go to budesonideworks.com, you can teach doctors, and you can tell your neighbors, and you can tell your loved ones what they can do. Thank you. But I'm going to give you some examples. Right now, it's an uphill battle. Once they get in the hospital, it's like they're in jail. Have you noticed that? It's crazy. So in Georgia, a retired senator has his wife in the hospital on a ventilator in the ICU. He calls me desperate, and he says, what can I do? And I tell him what I just told you, and the doctors say no, and he pushes back, and he stands his ground. You fight where you are. You don't try to transfer your loved one to another hospital. It's this way everywhere. You stand your ground because we're in the United States where we still have patient rights. And so hour after hour, day after several days, they finally broke, and they said, okay, we'll try it, but it won't work. Well, she's off the ventilator. She's out of the ICU. That's Senator Crotts from Georgia. Give him a call. Or if you go to Fort Worth, Texas, this is what's happened this week. These are the fights that I'm involved in over the phone when I'm not working or when I am working, whenever they call. But in Fort Worth, a lawyer calls me and says, would you please help my friend? He's a judge. His dad is in the hospital in Mansfield, Texas, in the ICU on a ventilator, and he has emphysema before he got there, and he's elderly, and he has a lot of health problems, and they're saying there's nothing else they can do. So I talked to the judge about his dad, and the judge stands his ground and says everything that I told you, and the doctors say, no, 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 we don't do budesonide, that won't work. We're doing the CDC protocol. And eventually they break, and they say, well, we'll try it, but it won't work. Well, he's off the ventilator. He's out of the ICU. That's with a judge, with friends that are judges, with friends that are lawyers. But you know what? If you don't bend, if you stand your ground for your loved one, I guarantee you're the best advocate for your patient. It's pretty clear doctors are not their patients' advocates most of the time. I'm very embarrassed by our healthcare system right now. But it's been hijacked. It's been hijacked. There are people that are healthcare providers that really do care. Don't stay at home and try to do herbs and spices and vitamins. We have things that have been proven. Budesonide works. Budesonideworks.com has lots of information for you. You can look at what Pierre Corey has talked about. Pierre Corey is a doctor from Wisconsin, a critical care doctor, and he talked about ivermectin. I think he's a very smart man. But we're at war. And you all know that. That's why you're here. You've heard it over and over again. Germ warfare. They're talking about Lambda variant, Mu variant. They're going to go down the whole alphabet till they get shut down. But in the meantime, we're not helpless. We're not hopeless. There are effective early outpatient treatment strategies. Let's give it up for the governor of Florida, DeSantis. Boy, has he stood up as a leader. Governor DeSantis, kudos to you. I saw a picture with him with a banner behind him saying early outpatient treatment. He's saying what they don't want you to know. He's putting it in print. When Fauci showed up on January 2020 and he said, we're going to have you just kind of shelter in place and we're going to shut things down and we're going to wait for a vaccine, I think that's failed. I think we've seen enough death and destruction. But, you know, I'm doing this monoclonal antibody infusion center, and every other person there is angry that they're there because they've been vaccinated. They're saying, how can this be? Why am I here? Why am I so sick? And I have diabetes, high blood pressure, I'm overweight, I'm elderly, I'm at great risk, and I did what they told me to do, and I'm here. Well, it still works, And so whether you've been vaccinated or not, they're getting better. But how crazy is it that Biden would try to say, well, we're going to stop monoclonal antibody infusions for the vaccinated? Wow, why is he hating on the vaccinated? We love people, whether they're what color they are, whether they're vaccinated or not. They're not our enemy. People are not our enemy. Our fellow Americans are not our enemy. And so don't let them divide us. Don't let them divide us into the vaccinated against the unvaccinated and vice versa, the masked and the unmasked. We're Americans. Let's stand together. Let's roll up our sleeves and help each other. United we stand, one nation under God. He didn't leave us helpless or hopeless. We have some medicines that are generic, inexpensive, readily available, safe enough to use on 2-pound premature babies in the ICU. That's pretty delicate. There's no more delicate person than that. And they give budesonide for decades now to the fragile in the ICU without batting an eye. This is safe. It's $3 a treatment. Did you know that? If you paid the full cash price for a treatment, you might get the discount with GoodRx or something and cut it in half. But time's up on this. It's time to take our healthcare system back. If you have a loved one that gets sick with COVID, if they test positive and they have symptoms, get them treated early. Keep it simple. Keep it boring. If they get test positive, check into the monoclonal antibodies. Get the budesonide. Go to budesonideworks.com. There's a providers tab, and you can find providers in different states that will do telemedicine. But if your doctor might do the right thing where you are, start with your local doctor. If he'll do the right thing, then good for him. That's where you should start. But if he won't, you're not helpless, and you can tell him you're fired if he won't do the right thing. I think it's time to start firing some doctors. Well, thank you for staying late. God bless you, and God bless America.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, one more time, let's hear for Dr. Richard Bartlett.